Join the Brew Crew. You might be our next winner. Text BREW to 30218 for your chance to win from 1240 The Brew. 1240 KOKL, Okmulgee, Oklahoma.
SJ, welcome to Muskogee Radio, your weekly source for tribal and community news, interesting guests and discussions, plus a local events calendar. James, don't go. Gary Fife, Jahojifkidos. Welcome to Muskogee Radio here on 1240 The Brew, here in downtown Okmulgee. First thing, our sidewalk superintendent report on the council house. It's cold. That's it. And they're actually working on the landscape around it, so we're getting there, folks, and we'll let you know when those doors open and you can wander in and check it out. Getting on with our program here, we have a couple of segments that we would like to share, and then, of course, community announcements. First of all, we have a conference coming up looking at the sad and sometimes tragic topic of suicide. But this is aimed at its prevention and getting help to those folks who might need it or contemplating it, or perhaps a loved one, family, or friend who might be in need of those kinds of services. We'll be speaking with staff members there from the Behavioral Services program. In our second segment, how many of you know where the little nursery rhyme 10 Little Indians came from and what it actually means? I spoke with a journalist from Indian Country Today about the origins of that song, its many interpretations, and where it sits today. Many of you, including yours truly, heard it first as a child, learning to count to 10, but that wasn't exactly what it meant. And it's got kind of a grisly past here and there. But first of all, let's get on with our program. We'd like to welcome to our studios Rena Hernandez and Thomasine Fife. And yes, it is Fife, and it's a relation that I've never asked too much about. So welcome. Thank you for coming in and making time for us this morning.
Thank you for having us.
And you can go ahead and say something if you like.
I'm happy to be here.
Yeah, with an intro like that. Hey, I'm related to our guest. I'm not even sure. By marriage, I believe. That's correct, I believe. Anyway, you're here to talk to us about the upcoming HOPE conference next week. Now, is that the full title there? What's it totally called?
Yes, it is the 2017 Muskogee Creek Nation Hope Conference, restoring hope throughout our nation.
And we said it's aimed at the issue of suicide and its prevention, right?
Yes. There are several goals for this conference. Some of those include we definitely wanted to increase sector commitment to participate in a collaborative approach to suicide prevention, as well as enhance community participation in suicide prevention activities. So the conference will provide valuable education and training relating to wellness, mental health, suicide prevention, intervention, and treatment, along with substance abuse prevention, treatment.
All right, before we get any further along in our discussion, let's find out kind of how we're doing, not only our tribe, but our state and Native Americans across the nation now. Thomasine, I understand that you just got some valuable information there.
Yes. The data shows that suicide among youth aged 10 to 24 in Oklahoma, it's an ever-pressing health problem. In Oklahoma, on average, 2 Oklahomans between the age of 10 and 24 die by suicide. And the thing that we'd like to focus on is that it's preventable. And so that's what we hope to accomplish with our conference by bringing in national speakers that have done research on best practices. These are the gold standards that we're going to be able to utilize within our health system, clinics, and hospitals.
I've always been interested in asking the question, how does it affect us and our tribe? From your positions, both of you, please, what have you seen? How's the tribe doing? Are we going up that ladder with more of a problem or down and addressing it successfully? What would you all say?
I would think our tribe is doing all that it can to address suicide prevention. We have a SAMHSA, which is a Substance Abuse and Mental Health Services Administration grant that is allowing us to focus on this issue and to help prevent suicide prevention. I started in 2008, and since then we've been able to train our workforce development to provide the best service that we can for suicide prevention. In addition, we've been able to utilize our clinicians to go out to the schools that can help the students that need needing our services. You know, sometimes it's hard for the parents to get the students to our office. You know, they have to take off from their work, as well as transportation could be an issue. Maybe they might not have enough gas money to get from Wetumpka to Okemah. So we do try to do the best that we can to meet our citizens where they're at and get them the help that they need.
It's an outreach effort also, right? Now, you didn't mention any numbers there, and I'm not sure whether or not you have that kind of data. But I am still interested, you know, if there are numbers you can share, how are we doing?
Okay. The latest numbers that we have for Oklahoma is from 2011 to 2015, and it shows per 100,000 we have 27.4 Native American males that we lose by suicide. Comparatively, if you compare it to the white population, that's at 19 per 0.8. So that is quite a bit of a difference. We're actually 3 times higher than the national average for males. And for African Americans, it's 15.2% for males.
Rena, do you have a perspective on that? The same question?
Absolutely. I mean, whenever you talk about statistics, the one thing that you definitely want to keep in mind is that even the research that we have right now, or the data that we have now, is misrepresentative, because a lot of suicide deaths are misreported. So that's one of the strategies that we're looking at implementing now, is making sure that our law enforcement are trained to ensure that they are reporting appropriately whenever they do encounter a death by suicide. So I think that's the biggest point. Even though Thomasine mentioned some of the statistics, I mean, you just have to keep in mind that there are so many more that we lose to suicide that we don't have the data for, just because of that situation. Or even if they do, you know, you never know if whenever someone has a car accident, was that an intentional suicide or was that an accident? So there are so many different variables that come into play when you look at the data. But just the numbers that we do have now just show that it is a very significant problem, and we definitely need to do as much as we can to address this issue.
The situation is tragic, and the thought that someone might be able to carry this out, or even the fact that they're driven to attempt it. Now, are either of you kind of on the front lines? Do you take calls from people looking for help?
Yes, I do. I'm a licensed alcohol and drug counselor, and so we have an on-call line that we answer after hours and on weekends for our clients, and we rotate that out. So I have been on call and received several calls that we've had to assist individuals and help them get the help that they need, as well as making sure that they have transportation there as well.
All right. Now, when you're talking with someone, what is it that you hear? Is there a general direction, flow, so to speak, idea or something like that you consistently hear from people seeking help, or is it just really across the board?
Well, I would say the one thing that I hear most is hopelessness. Suicide behavior, it's complex and there's no single reason why they do it. It's a number of things. It could be they're feeling the hopelessness, but there's also situations that are happening in their lives. For young people, it is their relationship. So perhaps they're in their first boyfriend-girlfriend relationship and they break up, and young people don't have sometimes the skills that they need to manage those feelings and know that things will get better. And so I would say hopelessness.
Irina, has that been your experience also?
Yes, and that's pretty much what it is. It's what they call the perfect storm. So a lot of times, individuals who do contemplate suicide, they just have various activities that happen within their life at a certain time that just puts them more at risk. So it's just a lot of it. There's no one problem that relates to suicide. It's just several factors at one time that really impacts that person's
Now,
stability.
Thomasine was talking about a young person who has gone through a bad turn in a relationship. Is that pretty much the bulk of what you hear?
No, not necessarily, but I'm just saying that is an example of what young people have going on in their lives, as well as social media. I know a lot of the students that we have coming in do have some issues that either began on social media or are continuing to happen. And so it's just a different time that we live in. You know, previously when I was in high school, I was able to go home and get away from some of that negativity. But now, you know, young people are on social media and are getting things in their inbox, popping up on their phones. And so that can play an issue as well. In addition, someone could be suffering from a mental health illness, and you know that's treatable as well. And so that's something that we look at. Mental health is connected to our whole body. You know, our brain is connected to the body, and so we want to promote overall wellness. And just like we would with someone if we thought they were having a heart attack, or if maybe we thought their blood sugar was high. You know, diabetes, we talk about that all the time, and that's what we're hoping to do is by having this conference is promoting mental wellness and how we can get people help.
Well, you mentioned the social media, and I've seen several national stories where this kind of tragedy is connected. Young people are being bullied or stalked even because of some incident that's happened with them in a relationship with their peers. Now, would you say that has been probably the main difference then between people of my generation who grew up without cell phones and social media to young people today who have grown up consistently? I mean, they've known social media all their lives. So do you follow me there? Do you see a difference?
I think I'm interpreting that you're asking if that is one of the leading factors.
Yeah.
And so it's a big part of a young person's life. You never see a young person without their phone. They have their different accounts, Instagram, Facebook, Twitter. And so I would say that social media is a big part of a young person's life. And so that's where we've been looking at different ways to approach them and get them help. We have a text line now that we went into partnership with the crisis text line, and now we utilize the word CREEK in caps, CREEK. If someone is in crisis, we encourage them to text 741-741 with the word CREEK, and a crisis counselor will get on there. Sometimes young people don't want to talk face-to-face or even over the phone to someone, but they will communicate by text. So that's one of the ways that we're taking an approach with social media to target and engage our young people.
Let me ask the both of you, what seems to be successful? What technique or group of techniques you think is useful in reaching someone in this kind of mood, in this crisis situation? What works? Or is it really, are you really able to kind of look at one thing and pin it down saying, well, this works,
I think it's so complex, like Thomasine mentioned, that each person is going to be very different. So just depending on that person, I think the most important thing is making sure that you're educated on the warning signs to look for. So that way you do notice when someone may be potentially in crisis and you can respond appropriately. So.
And I would think that people learning that someone does care about them and having someone that they can talk to, that supports them, is always beneficial as well. Sometimes people just get in that tunnel vision, and that's all they can see is the problems, but they don't look at the people that are there standing beside them, providing the support that they need. So this just helps the support people kind of step up and make themselves more available.
Well, I've discussed this subject several times with different people, and the topic of warning signs has always come up, and that's one I always ask you about. Like, what sorts of things should we be looking for when we suspect someone is in this situation? What are those signs? Either one of you.
So some of the warning signs are direct, like making statements, "I want to die," or saying things like, "I wish I could go to sleep and never wake up." Also, it could be maybe they're making searches for ways to die, and maybe making those arrangements to do that, like getting access to a gun, or maybe getting medications. So those types of things are direct. Young people will even post it on their social media. We've even had an instance at a school where a teacher reached out to us because a student was writing negative, kind of suicidal type messages on the whiteboard, on the chalkboard. So, they were a little concerned with them, so they contacted us. Luckily, we had went in and provided the suicide prevention education question, persuade, and refer to the staff, and they contacted us just like we had asked, and so it worked out really well. That person is now engaged with our services and this has been over, I would say, 3 years ago, and I still see this. I see her in the community individually, and looks like she's doing well. She has the support that she needed at the time.
It must make you feel better when you cross trails.
Mm-hmm. It does, always knowing that we were able to assist someone. I think about how things were when I was younger and maybe the support that I didn't have, so I really try to fill that gap and be a person's support system.
No, along with what the ideas you mentioned there, I've heard of things that you can look for if someone starts giving away beloved possessions or writing goodbye notes to friends and family, or something related to something like that. Rena, is that correct? And is there something else?
Yeah, I mean, those are a couple of examples of a warning sign. Would definitely be someone giving away something that they would never part with, but now they want you to have it, basically because they're not going to be around any longer. So anytime they're doing any of those, taking any of those actions, but also just making sure that you do pay attention to the conversations that you have with them, because like Thomasine mentioned, someone may just say, I just want to go to sleep and not wake up. So you just have to be very clear, even if you're not certain as to is that a suicide threat, or just go ahead and ask that question and be straightforward and just say, are you thinking about suicide? Because if you don't ask the question, then they're not going to tell you that they need help. So
take them seriously.
Yes, always take everything seriously, even especially with our youth, because a lot of times we forget that, they may go through relationships, and we've all as adults gone through them and gotten past them. But for a child, they don't always see that long-term future. So a lot of times the end of the week is what they're looking at. So something that impacts them so severely can definitely put them in crisis. So any time that they do make any type of threat, then we definitely want to take all of those threats seriously. Just to make sure, so that way they definitely know that if a subject like this is brought up, then we're going to address that and work through that with them, and that they know that they do have the support that they need there.
Okay, now quickly some ideas on your conference agenda, and of course a place, time, guests real quick?
Yes, we are very excited about our upcoming conference. It's our first annual Hope Conference, and it will take place at River Spirit Casino Resort in Tulsa, Oklahoma. The conference dates are November 15th and 16th, with a pre-conference training day on November 14th. The event is free to the public and also free of charge. So we are looking at providing about 20 education credits to all attendees to attend all 3 days of the conference. And we are just very excited to be able to provide this training and education not only to mental health providers and our staff, but definitely the community, because everyone does play a role in suicide prevention, and not everyone is going to come through treatment or even our healthcare system. So it's very important that you don't leave it up to prevention workers and crisis staff to address this problem, because otherwise there are so many people falling through those gaps and completing suicide. So.
If someone were interested in speaking with you about your conference, about your program in general, or were in immediate need of desperate help, how would they get in touch with you?
Our Okmulgee office number is 918-758-1910, and they can call that 24 hours a day. Our 1-800 number will be on the machine after 5 o'clock, and that rolls over into the emergency room, so someone is always answering that number.
So help is always available.
Yes.
Yes.
All right, before we let you go, Thomasine Fife and Rena Hernandez. Wasn't it Robin Williams said in one of his movies that suicide is a permanent solution to a temporary problem? And would you agree with that?
Absolutely. And whenever someone does think about suicide, they do see that as a solution to their problem instead of the problem itself. So it's a good point to keep in mind that a lot of times that irrational thinking that we don't always understand, you can't possibly understand unless you've been in that position. So it's just important to keep an open mind and not be judgmental when people are saying things like that. But definitely reach out whenever you feel like someone may be in danger, because you may be the lifeline to save that person's life.
Right, I agree, and I would also say that that is their perceived solution. So suicide is not the problem. They have other problems, but it's their temporary solution that they are seeing at that time. But there's so much that you can do. Just even saying that I'm here with you, let me help you get help. Can I call for you? Walking them through that process, because maybe they don't know who to reach out to, or they're not comfortable talking with someone else, telling their story again. But if that another individual could contact for them, that would be very helpful. Wonderful. And know that they have support.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Thomasine and Rena. We want to say thank you to your substance abuse and program and the work you're doing. Now, I hope that people might pick it up and check it out and attend the conference next week.
Absolutely. And they can also find additional details at eventbrite.com. If you'll just select the 2017 Hope Conference, then all of the complete agenda for each of the days will be lined out there for you, and registration link will be provided as well.
Did I call you Renee or Rena?
You've been calling me both, but that's okay.
Okay. All right. I just want to make sure, and public apology and mea culpa here. All right, we'll take a short break here on Muskogee Radio, and we'll be back with the origins of 10 Little Indians. So please stay with us here on 1240 The Brew.
Has created an online survey to get feedback from you about our coverage and operations. Participants will be entered to win artwork from Muskogee Creek artist Dana Tiger. At the beginning, you will be asked for your name, phone number, and email. The survey consists of 18 questions that are either multiple choice or in a yes or no format. Visit www.muskogeemedia.com to participate. The survey is open November 1st through November 30th. Winners will be announced December 1st.
Who am I? Am I native? I don't want people assuming things because I'm Indian. I just want to be me. But how do I live in two worlds? Some guys just check out by doing meth. But that ain't for me. Because I see my family, my friends, my drum making, my future. There are a lot of cool things about being who I am, and meth isn't one of them.
Learn more at ncai.org. A message from the Partnership for a Drug-Free America and the National Congress of American Indians.
Hear that? That's the sound of hope being killed by meth. Methamphetamine use is causing huge problems in our community. Hear that? That's the sound of something you can do about it. Events like rodeo, res ball, and family time can help keep kids away from meth.
Talk to your kids. Keep our culture alive. A message from the Partnership for a Drug-Free America and the National Congress of American Indians.
Learn more at ncai.org.
November is Native American Month. In reality, it is far more than that. This is the time when we, as Native people, look at the determination of our people to not only survive the hardships placed on our ancestors, but their will to make the world a better place for those who would later come. We are still here. For all things Muskogee during the month of November, visit our website at mcn-nsn.gov. We are the Muskogee Creek Nation.
Welcome back to Muskogee Radio here on 1240 The Brew in beautiful downtown and cool and crisp Muskogee. How many of you grew up with the nursery rhyme and learned to count possibly by hearing the little chant, 10 little Indians, you know, the 1 little, 2 little, 3 little Indian thing? How many of you know where it came from and what it actually meant when it was first shared with the American public? Well, I spent a little bit of time with Alex Jacobs, who is a Mohawk man who writes for Indian Country Today, who wrote a piece about that particular little song and its history and associated information, and shared quite a bit with me. Now, first of all, let me let you know that there's one point in this story where yours truly, me, Gary Fife, the only guy who does this, decided to take out one word, and that was the N word. And that's the only time I did it. Nobody pressured me. I chose to do that because I don't like that word, and didn't want it in my work. So anyway, also all the opinions of our guest are his opinions. So leave it there. And there's a little bit of information we could share right at the tail. Or now, let's do it now. The National Museum of the American Indian did have a copy of 10 Little Indians on its bookshelf. When I called their PR department, I got this huge gasp. You are kidding me, I didn't know that. Kind of rattled my eardrum there for a second. But it turns out that is the Sherman Alexie version, a novel he wrote, a satire that he titled 10 Little Indians, so it is not the nursery. Anyway, enough of this. Let's roll our pre-recorded piece, 10 Little Indians.
1 little, 2 little, 3 little Indians, 4 little, 5 little, 6 little Indians, 7 little, 8 little, 9 little Indians, 10 little Indian boys. 10 little, 9 little, 8 little Indians, 7 little, 6 little, 5 little Indians, 4 little, 3 little, 2 little Indians, 1 little Indian.
My name is Alex Jacobs. I'm a freelance writer, spoken word poet, and a visual artist. I'm Akwesasne Mohawk, and I've been based in Santa Fe, New Mexico for the last 20 years.
All right, Alex, I saw the piece that you'd written for Indian Country Today, looking at the old nursery rhyme that most of us have heard in our childhood about 10 little Indians, right?
Yeah.
I'm curious as to see, what motivated you to first stop and take a look at that and then want to follow up and trace its origins.
Well, yeah, we have Indian Country Today. We had a stable of native writers, researchers, freelancers, and editors. And Julianne Jennings first covered this, I think in 2012, as an op-ed, an opinion piece. And she hasn't been writing for the last year or so. I believe she's Lakota or Anishinaabe. I'm not quite sure at this point. but she's the one that traced it back to an American songwriter who was well known, named Septimus Winter, and all the way back to it's 1864 or 1868. It's hard to. I followed that research, but it's hard to pin down a date when it was written or when it was introduced or when it was made available, you know. But those are the furthest back dates of when it appeared. So she did the piece, and one of my editors assigned me the story to look further into it. And so I researched and found a lot more, even current and contemporary music, not just the children's rhymes and the poems and the books, you know. There's even rock and roll done. There's a crazy version done by the Yardbirds called 10 Little Indians, but it was written by Harry Nilsson, a great songwriter in the 70s and 80s, I guess. And he did like a biblical version of all these sins. And although it wasn't, he says it wasn't the 10 Commandments, it's very biblical in that these 10 Indians, these 10 people, that they're not necessarily committing any crimes, but things happen to them that shouldn't happen to them.
10 little Indians standing in a line. One stood looking at another man's wife. Then there were 9 little Indians, their hearts all full of...
Let me ask you, were you like most of us? Did you hear this as a child?
Oh, sure. Yeah. It was used for counting in schools. It still is. And I heard from some European friends that it's used to teach English as well in some countries in Europe. And so, yeah, this is, I mean, a lot of my art, my poetry and my art is based on what you can say is already in people's minds. You know, you're hitting the buttons. And you're kind of making people replay or recall imagery and phrasing, you know? And so, yeah, this is right up my alley as far as 10 Little Indians and what it means to people, because it does mean something whether you know it or not. It's buried inside your memory.
Now, I want to know what your reaction is. I could imagine it's changed since you were little to reaching a professional writing stage in your life. Perception of that particular tune has changed. Would you say?
Yeah, sure, it has. You know, I mean, I don't know. Back then, we've heard it over time and over our own lives, and so it even has changed, you know, in our own lives, in our own times. You just felt a little bit weird about it, you know, every time you heard it, as you became from a child to maybe a teenager to an adult with children, you know. You did feel something weird and strange going on.
Have you ever heard any stories about what the song meant or where it came from, or possibly who sang it once or twice in a particular age?
Well, it was actually, like I said, it goes back to the 1860s, and it was performed at minstrel shows, and became a standard of blackface minstrel shows. And over time, of course, the N-word was thought to be insensitive in future generations, and it changed back to Indians. So apparently it was Indians first, and then I don't know if you want to call it political correctness or as it was performed in different shows, it was Indians for most of its life, and then it became soldiers.
Now, before you go any further, let me do something for our listeners here. I know that the N-word there is highly offensive to many people these days. So if you would, Alex, if we need to use that phrase again, just refer to N-word. Would that be okay?
Sure.
Okay, thank you. Well, now go on with your story, please.
Well, then it even became, over time, because it relates to children and counting and language, you have teddy bears and animals and bunnies. And lately, they've had bunnies dressed up as Indians. And there's even an award-winning book about this, Bunnies Dressed Up as Indians, a counting book. That's actually sold at the National Museum of the American Indian in, I believe, Washington, D.C., and maybe New York. And somebody just did not vet this, It's an award-winning book. But they just dress up these bunnies like Indians, and there's no, stuff like this doesn't have to be authentic, but it's just a pastiche of tribes. A mixture of plains and pueblo and woodlands, and if you're going to do it, you might as well make it look authentic. If you're teaching something, you might as well teach that, well, this is what these pueblo Indians look like, even though they're dressed up like bunnies or whatever. So that wasn't even done. But of course, over time, it's been these with animation now, with TV and cartoons and animation. Yeah, some of them are just, the old ones are quite ugly with stereotypical faces, and the chanting and the war drum sometimes, and then they just become cute, just cute little Indian beings, but all of them dressed, most of them just down to breechcloth and moccasins and headbands,
You bring up a subject that I do remember as a kid. I believe it was a Popeye cartoon where he was rescuing the damsel and had to fight off these Indians, and as he was knocking them out and into graves, hitting them so hard that they fell into the earth, and that turned into a grave. That while he was doing that, he began singing this little chant until he had indeed put 10 of them under the ground. Do you perhaps recall that?
Well, now that you mention it, yeah, I probably do. I like Popeye, and I liked Alice the Goon, and all that stuff. But there was another one that in my research, it reminded me too. It brought me back, and that was the Walt Disney Silly Symphony, and we found the actual video, and I remember the Old King Cole, and a major part of this, I don't know, it's several minutes long, and they go through all the Disney and fairy tale storyland characters that all the kids know, and Little Bo Peep and Peter Piper and all that stuff. But the 10 Little Indians, actually, it's a big part of the cartoon, and there's a part there where they not only do their song, but they start dancing and war whooping, and all of Storyland goes along with them. So you're imagining, children watching this also doing this, and that's where we get that war whoop. It goes along with the 10 Little Indians, and so it's ingrained. All these children are now adults and pass it on to their children, And so our children are affected by this to this day.
Right. I would imagine it is indeed still being used as a teaching tool in schools here in Indian America and Indian country. I imagine it's still out there. Now, I wanted to ask you, have you ever heard any other stories about how this song was sung by different people? The reason I ask is I had a good friend that I highly respect. For some reason heard that particular tune, and we got to discussing it. And she said it was being sung by U.S. Army soldiers at a fort in North Dakota, I believe. They were watching the Mandans fall over and die because of the smallpox-infected blankets that they had been given. Now, that really shocked me. I thought, what, this little innocent little tune that really meant this? You know, have you ever run across that by any chance?
Not historically. No, I've never actually heard that. You know,
it's kind of a tough one to think that something you thought was so innocuous actually had this kind of almost grisly background. Now, in today's world, as many people re-examine items of our history and culture, we've seen a few of these sorts of things pop up. But this one seems to permeate the basic education that's given to American children and indeed children around the world. And if you think about it, it seems wrong. So if you had a magic wand and could change things, what would you want to do to show people the true meaning of this song?
Well, I mean, Bill Haley and the Comets did a version in the 50s, and the Beach Boys in the 60s. And like I told you, Nilsson and the Yardbirds did a version, a more political version, in the 70s. But, you know, in one sense, it's not going away. I think every time it pops up, you can... It's a moment to educate the educators and the schools. In the sense that it's kind of not going away, I think we all have to make that effort to edify and teach people and to do more on media. And I think the mascot issue is actually a good place to tie this in. Because, again, when people talk about Native American mascots on school sports teams or whatever, and when you talk to people who don't know much or anything about Native American people, the first thing they do is they go down their list. Oh, I visited a reservation. Oh, my buddy in World War II was an Indian. So they tell you everything they know, and it's not much. And a lot of it is based on maybe that Popeye cartoon, maybe that Walt Disney cartoon. So the 10 Little Indians and the War Whoops, that's all within their repertoire of what they know about Indians. And if you just sit there like a medicine man and don't say anything, they will tell you absolutely everything they know in a minute or two, and you will... to find out where they stand. So I think it's that moments like that, and any moment you get in media, in print, on the internet, on radio and TV, to educate people about this. And actually, the original version, before it became, I think it was kind of standardized, or people got the meaning of the 10 Little Indians going away, which is, again, part of history. You know, the kids today will tell you, we thought they were all dead, you know. Why is that? Well, because of stuff like this, 10 Little Indians. But on the original song, as these characters were going away and dying, the last one, living all alone, he got married, and then there were none. That was in the original. and that was used in some versions. So even though they killed the first 9, the last one he married in, which is kind of the whole Manifest Destiny or the original BIA or the government programs, was to assimilate the Indian, so they disappear culturally. So even this song, the original version, which isn't used that much anymore, that was part of a program and agenda too. One little Indian living all alone, he got married, and then there were none. Sort of like getting elimination and assimilation all in one package. Yeah, and it's why was that dropped over time, and it just became the 10 little Indians dying off, and of course it was cleaned up so that children singing that didn't really know they were talking about death and dying and actual genocide. And there is a legal and there's a lot of legal and moral issues in it, Right. Now, this article has been out for some time in Indian country today. Have you had any reactions from any of the people you know or have met, casually perhaps, or good friends? Have they said anything about what you wrote? Well, a few people did. A few people did. I got emails mostly, but the actual there was a lot of people sharing this particular piece, which was kind of surprising and good. A lot of educators. I heard from a lot of educators or people who said they shared it with other educators, and it was there was over 4,000 Facebook shares and dozens of copies and letters and postings, and tweets on it and printed and mailed. So, that's a good thing when you're writing as a freelancer and as a part of a group. How we were able to work together and get it out, and we did our job, and the people reading it and absorbing it, it's now in their repertoire to help them do their job. Well, perhaps just a little discussion here might help a few down here that hadn't thought about it before. Alex, I'm going to ask you if there's a final thought you'd like to add, and then we'll get out of your way. Well, Agatha Christie, one of the world's English language most famous authors, millions and millions of books. This book, and it was originally called 10 Little N-Words, and they retitled it to And Then There Were None, which is the last words of that nursery rhyme, 10 Little Indians. Sold over 100 million copies, one of the biggest selling books ever. And there was all these movies made about it. So, it's there. And I think in part of our education, we can't ban it or get in a political correctness huff. It's all about education. It's in the people's minds, and we have to educate ourselves and educate other people because it's in there, and even like that kid's book, what is it called? 10 Little Rabbits, and it's even in Walking Dead, the popular TV show, and now it's in a rock and roll play, Bloody Andrew Jackson. And we may not like to hear about Andrew Jackson, and we may not like that people are paying tickets to go see Bloody Jackson. And the young people, it's one of the things they like to do is dance this 10 Little Indians, and when they put it on the play in their high schools and stuff. We can't really stop that, but we should be engaged with it and let people know, if you hear about people doing the production, to kind of get involved, I mean, it is history, and Jackson was a genocidal maniac, so you can't change that. but you can change and educate people when they want to put on a show like this.
Right. I think you hit the nail on the head. Education is the most effective tool in changing these minds. Alex Jacobs, thank you so much for your time here. We appreciate you talking with us and the piece. Now, if someone wanted to go back and read it, where could they find it?
Indian Country Today MediaNetwork.com, and you can go to. It would be in culture or education. I believe it's most easily found on the education department. You have, you have culture, news, history, education, and or you can, if you see my name first anywhere, you can go to my name. But it's at Indian Country Today, MediaNetwork.com, and go to education. And if there's 2012, if you want to go into the archives, her name's Julianne Jennings, and she did an article 2012 that did the early research.
I'm going to have to go look that up. Thank you, sir. We appreciate your educating us and sharing this information with our listeners. Maybe that'll be one small step, as has been said, toward the right direction. So thank you, sir.
Hey, thank you, Gary.
1 little, 2 little, 3 little Indians, 4 little, 5 little, 6 little Indians, 7 little, 8 little, 9 little Indians, 10 little Indian boys, 10 little, 9 little.
Alex Jacobs from Indian Country Today. Hope you learned something from that particular piece. I certainly know that I did. Again, one word was taken out, and yours truly took it out. So if you have any questions about censorship or somebody telling us what to do, that ain't the case. If you're mad, be mad at me, whatever. And of course, the opinions of our guests were those of our guests, and not Muskogee Media, Muskogee Creek Nation, or 1240 The Brew, or anyone like that. And once again, I did ask the Museum of the American Indian. I called up their PR department about a copy of 10 Little Indians being on their shelf, and the first thing I got was this horrified gasp. It nearly sucked my eardrum out, and she said, "Oh my God, if it's there, it's coming down now." And the lady took off to check it out and came back, gave me a call a bit later and said it was the Sherman Alexie satire with the same title, 10 Little Indians. So learn something new every day. Okay, let's get on with today's announcements. First of all, it's the time of year again. The angel tree will be going up. It is up, and angels can be picked up at that time. If you want to assist a family or a child for Christmas, you may pick up an angel and fill it out. Gifts returned unwrapped, please, to the MCN Complex Community Services Building. And if you're interested and you have a question, 732-7869. America Recycles Day is coming up on November 15th. That's always a wonderful time. Monday, November 14th through the 18th, the Creek Nation will be hosting a recycling event. They'll be collecting electronics, cardboard, paper bottles, and aluminum cans. But if you've got refrigerators, small appliances, tires, and car batteries, no, they will not accept those items. And that runs from 9 a.m. to 12 p.m. on, again, Tuesday, November 15th. And Green Country Shredding Company will be there for all your documents to be shredded on that day, and they'll take care of you. Week-long recycling event, gather all your recycles and recycle. If you're interested, 549-2581. And we all know that this weekend is Veterans Day. Our Muskogee Creek Nation and Veterans Administration will be holding an event on the 9th. It's a open house. You can meet and greet Principal Chief James Floyd and Lewis Hicks and veterans of the Muskogee Creek Nation. The address is 1006 Bear Lane, Muskogee. Just look for the building with all the statues of our warriors out front. And Vaso will be showcasing its new exhibit designs, and once again, that's November 9th. And while we're on the subject of veterans, here's a piece I found I wanted to share real quick. November 7th marks the 50th anniversary of the death of Pascal Cletus Pula Sr., a citizen of the Kiowa tribe who was killed in action during the Vietnam War. By the time of his arrival in Vietnam, Pula had already fought in 2 wars, World War II and Korea, and earned a slew of military medals, including the Purple Heart, Silver Stars, and Bronze Stars for that service. But as many of our loved ones go, he was taken in combat. He was killed when his squad was ambushed. But he has been considered the most decorated Indian soldier in U.S. military history, with 42 medals and citations to his name, including 4 Silver Stars, 5 Bronze Stars, 3 Purple Hearts. A building at the Fort Sill Army Base in Lawton has been named for Mr. Pula. So wonderful. And of course, our own Vaso is holding its event. And Big Cassetta United Methodist Church is holding a Veterans Day program honoring all Native veterans. That's on November 10th from 10 till noon. All veterans are welcome, and a dinner will follow. It's 3 miles east of Highway 62 on Morris Road. Turn south on Prairie Bell Road. 3.5 miles. Church is on the left side. All right, 2017 Hope Conference, as we have discussed with our guests earlier in the program. That's on November 15th and 16th. Let's see, at River Spirit Casino Resort and Convention Center. That's in Tulsa, 8330 Riverside Drive. You might want to check that out if you have someone dealing with the topic of suicide. You can restore hope throughout our nation. It's a free conference. Register and at the eventbrite.com, and there is credit for college and that sort of thing. All right, the Harjo Bird Family Reunion is coming up on the 18th at the Tulsa Indian Creek Community Center. That's 8611 South Union Avenue. That's the Jinx exit off of Highway 75 heading south. From that event will be taking place 10 a.m. to 4 p.m. Lunch at noon, and they're asking you to bring a covered dish, paper plates, paper cups, silverware, that sort of thing that you always need that you run out of at these kinds of events. They're asking for a small gift, as for their exchange gift situation. Once again, November 18th at the Tulsa Indian Creek Community, the Harjo Bird Family Reunion. All right, where are we now? Celebrating resiliency, addressing sexual assault through community healing. That's on Friday, December 1st. Registration starts at 8:30 a.m. Program from 9 to 1:30 at the College of the Muskogee Nation Student Center, room 107. And that's again one on Friday, December 1st. Okay, that's about everything I've got in my stack. If you're looking for an appropriate, perhaps Christmas gift, of course, Muskogee Radio has got T-shirts for sale, so check that out. Anyway, I'm out of time. I'm out of here. So Gary Fife saying, but oh, Mabo Hedges good. You've been listening to Muskogee Radio. Join us again next week for more local, tribal, and community news and updates. Mado.